Hi, and thanks for watching. Today we're going to be going over paper 2D side scrollers. Not to be mistaken with side scroller. So a side scroller basically is a 2.5D or a 3D based environment, but with an attached side scrolling camera. We, of course, are only going to be using two-dimensional textures, and in this example using texture, Sprite, and Sprite Flipbook to set up our initial project. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and name our project side scroller demo 2D. We'll create that. Now, as with any project you work on, the organization of your files is crucial to a fluid workflow. So I always like to come out and create my own folder, the base content folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and name it. And then within that folder, I'm going to create a couple of folders here, maps, blueprints, and as you can see, I can either right click inside the folder or click add new. In this case, textures. I'll also create an audio, and I'll create a character one as well. Okay, so we'll go back to our contents folder into 2D side scrolling blueprints, and then under blueprints there's a 2D side scroller character that is the default character placed in the project. In this case, we're going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to name it Racer X. I will expand or show my sources panel, expand my my folder, and I'm going to, let's save all first, and then I'm going to drag my blueprint class into my blueprints folder. It's going to ask me whether I want to copy or move it. I'm going to move it, and then I'll save all, and then here our actual map, I'm going to save this as our first initial map. Save current level. I'm going to call this race 00. Put it under my maps folder. And then what I'll do is under edit, go ahead and set up my default calls for my map and my default pawn class. My default pawn class is going to be my Racer X, and then my editor startup map will be my race 00, and I'll also do that for the game default map for now, but you'll more than likely change that to, let's say, a load screen, menu based level screen as well. So let's go ahead and close that, and the next thing we'll do is we'll go jump right into it and start importing our textures. And under our textures folder, I'm going to click import, and I have my textures in my folder on my desktop. There are two separate ones I'm going to import in, and as you can see here, the texture set there comes in a little skewed. What we can do to clean that up is do a Sprite actions, apply paper 2D texture settings. That cleans up some of the pixel, the stretching or dragging around of pixels or stretching of pixels based on the PNG that, in this case, PNG that I've imported. I'm going to do the same thing here with the second texture. Save all. And then we'll also, and as you can see, it's cleaned up that initially, and then I'll double click and open it up, and what we'll do is, let's zoom in and I'll let you see. What we'll do then is we will go to our level of detail, and we'll change our texture group from 2D pixels unfiltered to a UI based texture group, and you'll see a bit of a change on the cleaning of the pixels, make it a little smoother. Now my texture set is in high res, and that's the other reason why you're not getting super high clarity from the texture. Let's do the same thing for this one, and we'll change that to UI. Save that, close that, save all. And the next thing we're going to do is go ahead, let's jump right into extracting our sprites. We're going to extract this first level of this first file, and you'll have two ways of extracting, automatically or by grid. In this case, my antenna is sticking out a little bit there, and I don't like the way that bounding box is not fitting around the antenna, so I'm going to go ahead and just do and I know my texture set is already set in the grid of 128 by 128, so what I'll do is I'm going to separate and extract these out based on a 128 by 128 cell size. Perfect. I'm going to extract that, and then let's go ahead, we'll scale this down so you can see all of our textures there, and then let's increase that just a little. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing with my second texture set. And although it did it perfectly because there's no antenna, I'm going to remain constant in the way I associate these two textures. And then I'll extract those, save all. And then first thing we'll start doing is what we'll do is create our states. So we'll have, we also want to correct our pivot points. So also initially the pivot point shows up above our character, or in this case my car. So what we're going to do is adjust that as well. We'll take, now by default Unreal will take your one directional sprite and change its direction, changes your direction automatically for you, so you don't have to do any changing of state going left to right. So even though I have a driving right and a driving left animation state, I'm only going to create my driving right. So I'll select all of those. Well, first, actually, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and select all of our sprites, and we'll correct and set that pivot point first. We're going to go Asset Actions, Bulk Edit via Property Matrix. We'll go over to the right here, Sprite, change Center to Bottom Center. Then we'll save that. And then we'll check that first one just for clarity. Yeah, bottom center. So let's go on, close that. We'll do the same thing for our second set of sprites. Save all. So now I know that there's there are three states I'm going to set up. First, I'll do my idle, just 5 frames, 5 sprites. I'm going to create a flipbook. Selected those, right click, create flipbook. I'm going to call it driving _RT for right. Now, I could have just called it driving because it's going to set it in either direction anyway, but I wanted to do that just in case I want to do something and change up my gameplay or my states in the future. So in any event, let's go ahead and do that. We'll save, and then I'll do I did my, oh no, that's idle. I apologize. That's supposed to be idle racer. Sorry. So let's do the idle racer first. And then, sorry about that, then I'll do my driving right. So Flipbook, and then it's driving right. Apologize. So we'll save all. And then we have a jump. It's only one frame, but we'll create the flipbook. And that is going to be jumping underscore falling. In case I want to set up something that's either jumping or falling, it'll be the same thing. Save all for that. So next thing we're going to do is we'll go ahead and set up and save. So we've saved this level as race 00, but our character in here is still there because it's under the 2D side scroller character. So let's just delete that. Our player start, even though it's a network player start, will handle our player or our car spawning here. So we'll save current, and then we're going to go ahead and set up our initial blueprints, our blueprint states based on our updating animation section here. So we're going to go ahead and change these to, so we got an idle here, we'll change the idle racing, change this one to running, so driving, and then we're going to compile and save. And then over in the viewport, we've got our actual sprite, and right now it's still the default player. So we'll go ahead and change that as well. First I'll select that. Let's change that first. We'll make that our idle. Now, we got our capsule component, which handles our collision. We'll adjust that to fit our vehicle. And as you can see, it's not quite fitting there like we like. We'll bring that down to the bottom. Actually, snap that grid. Oh, we forgot to set our grid. I set it to 1 so that we can be a little more accurate. And now we still got some space up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my scale on this by 2 on the X and Z. And that fits pretty good right there, because when my antenna bends over, it will still be just about where that top of that collision is. Let's compile and save that. Our arrow component handles what direction we're going in. Of course, we already talked about sprites. Our camera boom handles where how the camera is, how far away from the target and what have you. So, and then our side camera itself, we can actually adjust that. We'll bring that down a little bit. Or a lot. And then our character movement handles our gravity, our, in your case, if you have a person, how high they step up, jump velocity and all that. You can see that there's a little exaggerated right now, but we can make adjustments on that later. Let's compile this and play, save and play, and take a look. So far, we should have, oh, let's stop, let's go back over to, oh, we don't have we're not in our environment here. And what we can do is actually, let's drag this and drag our tab in so that we can see our environment. Let's play. And so now, if we drive, we've got an idle state and a driving state. All right. So next thing we're going to do is, matter of fact, let's show you one more thing. So we jumped, and it still does the driving state. So we'll go ahead and add in our jumping. Now, of course, our variables are the properties that hold the values or the references to these objects that we're going to be referencing, or the actors in the world. So these properties can be accessible internally to the blueprint that we're working with. So they can be made accessible externally, so their values can be modified and with instances of the blueprint placed in a level. So we could go in here and we could take a look at our blueprint. We could say that we could explicitly create individual variables for each state, but that would take up a lot of time. We'd have to create each one individually. It would fill up our blueprint with a lot of clutter. So instead of doing that, we'll create an enumeration or an enum and to handle all of those states in one place. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead over to our blueprints folder, and we're going to do a new blueprint enumeration, and we'll call this car anim state. Then we'll double click and open it up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say this handles all of the animation states, and then we're going to create a new, we're going to do an idle, jumping, falling, we'll create a driving, create a draining, because our car is an electric car, so we're going to say draining. We'll do a charging, and we'll do a out of power. We're only going to, in this video, we're only going to handle or go over idle, the jumping, the driving has already been set as a default, and we're going to do an out of power. That'll be referencing sort of how our health depletes, but in this case, a power. So let's save this. We'll close that. And what we'll do now is we'll create, what we'll do is we're going to connect our animation states to the index, and this will define and allow us to select functions which will populate all of the states. So under the blueprints characters in our common area, we're going to create a variable and call it our C states. So let's go over to variable. We'll say C state, and this is going to be our, the variable type is going to be an enum. Actually, we'll just go ahead and type in car anim state as our variable type. We're going to compile that, and then the default value is our idle by default. We'll leave it at idle. Now, the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and we're gonna begin setting up our updating of our animation through using a switch. Again, that'll be part of our referencing our enumeration, because again, we would have to explicitly set up Boolean functions to check which states we're using if we had all these individual variables. But the switch will actually handle that for us. So let's go ahead and drag from our update animation, and we're going to do a switch. Switch car anim state. And as you can see, it automatically populates the things that are in that enumeration. But what we need to do is we need to reference this by getting our C state variable. Then from there, what we'll do is, so far we have our idle, but we're also going to switch to jumping when we need that as well. So first now, so we'll do that next. So we'll go ahead and set a flipbook and we'll drag from our jumping falling, and we're going to do Flipbook. We're going to set a Flipbook sprite for that. Let's clean this up a little bit. Just drag our comment box over a little bit. Pull up our Flipbook here. Oops. And then we'll set our Flipbook to jumping, falling. Save that. And then where our jump is being handled down here, we're going to call our enumeration. We're going to set enum. We're going to set our C state, actually. And when jumping, I'm going to call our jump. Compile. Let's play it. And so we're jumping, but when we land, we're not going back into our idle state. So we've got to set up and add in an onLanded event, and then we'll drag and call our C state enum, and we'll set that for an idle. We'll compile, save, play. So now idle, jump, drive. Now, excuse me, our idle is a bit fast there, so let me adjust that in our Flipbook. So let's go back over here to our texture set here. I didn't get a chance to adjust those, so I'm going to adjust. I like the way the driving looks, but let's adjust that idle. So I'll go into my Flipbook, and here we can adjust our animation based on our frames per second and or by our timeline here, and stretching out how long each frame is exposed or used, right? So I'll more than likely have to change this up to frames per second, because if I want to add a boost or something like that, I want my animation to speed up based on that speed of the car, right? But I can also smoke and mirror it by having some particle systems or something show up on top or layered on top of the car, and so you won't see the animation moving as it will. So I can do either way. So let me stretch these out. I'm going to go and do 2 each. Right, and then so it looks a little better. We'll save that. So now when we go and play, a little better, right? Okay, so we'll stop that. And then the next thing we're going to do is, now that we have our jumping set, we can go ahead, and now what we'll do is set up, I guess we could set up, what do we want to set up? I guess we could set up our health, or in this case our power, right? So just remember this: when I set up this UMG UI Design, I'm going to pull in the same progress bar, but my progress bar would be based on the power of the vehicle. In your case, it would be health of a person if you want to use a person. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back over to our scene, back over to blueprints, and I'm going to right click, go to user interface, and add a widget blueprint. I'm going to call this widget, I'm going to call it Power HUD. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to drag a progress bar in here. So I got a car here, and I'm going to make this bar pretty long. Over here on the right, you'll see that our progress is at 0 right now, but I can fill it up. And It won't show up right away because we'll have to add a few more functions in our blueprint to display it. As you can see, nothing yet, but we'll do that now. Let's go ahead over to our blueprints, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, and we're going to call it our C power, right, our car power, and we'll make this variable type float, because this will handle depleting our power based on a numerical number type float. Okay. So once we do that, we've got that set up. Now we'll go over and we'll create, or actually piggyback off of our event begin play by adding in a sequence. Right now it's just doing a set replicated, but what we're going to do is add one in to actually do or handle our HUD as well, or load up our widget. So let's go ahead and do a search on create widget, and as you can see, it created our widget. We're going to do this based on, we're going to grab our owning player, which is our game, get our player controller, and that class is going to be based on our power HUD. And let's see, what else do we want to do here? So and actually, I'm sorry, I created the HUD, but we needed to create our sequence as well. So actually, let's do this so you'll see a more fluent connection. So let's connect this back. So what I would do is, first let's do the sequence. I apologize. So let's do the sequence first, and from our then one, we'll create our HUD, our widget. And then get our player controller there. And then what we'll do is return a value. From the return value, we're going to promote a variable. And that variable from there, that is going to be our power bar. And that power bar is going to be, so we're set at a user as an object type, and then what we're going to do is drag out of here, and we're going to add a viewport, add to viewport, we'll set that to our target. We also have to set our class to power HUD. Compile that. And save. Let's take a look. So now we have our HUD, our power bar. So let's go back. Okay, so next we'll go to our HUD and tie the progress bar, or in this case the power bar, to our power HUD variable. So let's set our progress bar equal to 0. So let's go back over to that, and we'll just go down and set that to 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up create a new binding, or create binding here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a cast to the racer from here, It's eraser X. And of course our object is our player character. So get player character. And then from our eraser 1, we're going to get our power, our C power. And then we'll connect that to our return value. And that return value will be based on our percentage, our starting at 1 and depleting down to 0. So we've got that set up. So now if we go over, if we play, oh, so I forgot to set it to 1. So I forgot to set it to 1. So let's go over, let's stop this. Forgot to set our C power default value to 1. So that fills it up. Oops. Right, so now we'll compile and then we'll play, and now it's full. Now you can see that my power bar is full. So now we need to deplete it. And so when we base this health depletion on, receiving damage or what have you, in this case I'm going to relate our depletion of our power based on movement. So what I'm going to do is create a new event based on right and left arrows. And we're going to get, by doing a control and drag out C power. So we're going to reference so we're going to get our C power. And from here, what we're going to do is we'll drag from our C power, and we're going to get or set a C. We're going to set a C power, and we're going to say it's going to be a minus float or subtract. So we're going to say that we're going to subtract 1/10% of power. Then we'll go over here and say 0.1. Right, and then from here we'll set our C power, and what this is going to say is, what we're saying here is we're going to set our power. So we'll set our current power based on power when left or right arrow is pressed. Then what we're going to do is we will check or base that setting on when our power is less than or equal to 0. So when power is less than or equal to 0, when power is less than or equal to 0, set out of power. So now we're going to check that based on a Boolean branch. And so we're going to check, and actually let's go ahead, we want to make sure we're connecting everything. Set, press set there, set our branch, and we're going to say if true, call our C state and say out of power. So far when we move left and right and I press left or right buttons, it'll deplete, right? But now we want to make sure, let me select all of this and put it in a comment. Right click, create comment based on group. I'm going to say depletion of power. Depletion of power. What we want to do is we want to say out of power. We're going to drag our hand, set a flipbook state. I don't think we set a flipbook for it yet, so let's go ahead and check that too. So, do we have one? Not yet. So let's go out. Let's compile and save this first. Then we'll go back to the scene. We'll go back to textures. We'll right click and create a flipbook based on this one frame. We'll call it out of power. Save all. Yes. Go back to our blueprint. Grab our out of power. Right. Save that. I think that should be it. Let's play and test it. So let's go back and forth. So nope, depletion unless I'm going left or right. So now it's made our car turn gray, which is my indication for running out of power, but we're still moving. So let's go ahead and from our flipbook, let's go ahead and drag a disable input and base that on, and that's based on our get player controller. Player controllers what will be disabled. Let's compile and save and play. So now we'll jump, no depletion, but if I drive left or right, now we've got a out of power and I can't move. Now you can set up all kinds of things based on that condition. For example, I may want to send out someone to recharge my car or what have you. In this case, if you're a zombie, let's say your health depletes unless you're eating brains or what have you. That's where that health bar, you will alter that health bar based on your gameplay, based on your character's gameplay or that state. So in any way, that is our initial setup of a Paper 2D game, and I appreciate you for watching.